Danny Flexen and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut FLEXpectations. Starting to feel a bit like Groundhog Day, and not just because we're here at 4:30 every Thursday. It's more like year 55 in the Big Brother house. It's the worst like Geordie impression you'll ever hear, but just nothing's changing much, and some of the stories coming out of the boxing world at the moment are clearly things that would never attract the same sort of traction as they would when boxing is alive and kicking and we're getting fights every weekend. I suppose Mike Tyson making any sort of comeback, even if it's just for exhibition matches, would be news at any time. But yeah, I'm not so sure it's going to happen on any grand scale. And him against Shannon Briggs, while it would have a certain curiosity value, I would worry that one or both of them would get seriously hurt. So let's hope it's, once boxing's back to normal, these kind of ideas fade into the background. I spoke to Sauerland yesterday in an interview you'll see on the channel soon, and he was saying he's coming up with wacky ideas of how to get boxing on the move again almost every day. A lot of them are unworkable, unfortunately, but it just shows that everyone's kind of getting frustrated now. And even though some of the lockdown restrictions have been eased, as we heard on Sunday, with the follow-up 50-page PDF that came out on Monday, gyms have still not been opened, which is a prerequisite, I would think, for boxing to come back in any sort of form in the UK. We're still looking at hopefully July for shows to begin again behind closed doors. Something I am concerned about, and it's become more so over this shutdown period, because I've got to interview a lot of people that normally I wouldn't get to bump into at the big fight press conferences and weigh-ins and so on. And that's the small hall boxers, the ones who either have a job, regular job alongside their boxing career, or who have just about managed to make it their full-time occupation with the help of sponsors and so on. Although we expect some of the bigger shows, the TV broadcasters, the TV promoters to come back with shows from July onwards, it's very hard to see how small hall boxing makes any sort of comeback until crowds are allowed back in. And even when crowds are allowed back in, as I've alluded to before, it's going to be a while before the public at large have the confidence and the assurance to, be cheek by jowl with various other boxing fans, as fun as it might be, and get close enough within spitting distance, a phrase that's never been more appropriate. I think it'll be at least the end of this year, before the start of next year, start of 2021, before we see people a bit more confident about attending gatherings en masse, particularly live sports events or concerts and things like that. Gigs, I think you have to call them these days. Just showing my age, as I often do, if the Barnet wasn't enough. But yeah, getting back to the subject, small hall boxers are going to really struggle, I think, because there won't be any small hall shows, I don't think, or unless promoters are happy to lose money, because some of them are also managers and want to get their fighters out. We're not going to see much of that for the rest of this year without TV back in. Can they survive? And are we going to see a number of boxers drift away from the sport, never to return? It does happen. A lot of them may have to, if they have gone full-time pro, might have to go back and get a job on the side again, just to pay the bills. I know there's some boxers out there who've already gone back to work during the shutdown, and various job opportunities are available, even though the majority of us have been told to stay at home. So you've got to feel for them and what they're going to do. They're all training hard, they're all eager to get back in. And I guess the best piece of advice, and what a lot of boxers have said, particularly from the small hall environment, is to make sure you're ready so that you don't need a long training camp if a call comes. Because while the major TV promoters have a lot of fighters all jostling to get out before the end of the year, and we've got the restriction currently from the Board of Control that you can only have 5 fights per show maximum, you're going to have stacked cards with top fighters all getting out. There's not openings for fighters who aren't contracted to those promoters are going to be limited. However, if you've been on a limited training regime for however long it's been, and then you're suddenly in a big fight and you're having to really up the intensity of your training in the last few weeks when gyms reopen, injuries can happen. It increases that risk. And I think you will see some fighters, through no fault of their own, dropping out of fights as a result. And you will get more than the usual number of short notice calls to fill TV slots at short notice. So a lot of these small hall guys will need to be ready and willing to take risks as well and jump in at short notice with some, on paper, superior opposition, because at the end of the day, it might be your only chance to get a fight purse before the end of the year, as harsh as it seems. If you've got a TV promoter and a raft of sponsors, you can afford to be a bit more secure. You might not say, no, I'm not taking this fight, I'm not going to fight till 2021. You might not be that secure. Very few boxers are, unless you're, Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury in the UK. But the majority have a level of security where they can pick and choose, where they can negotiate a little bit more. And I think for small hall fighters, because the opportunities are so limited, and it could be a case of putting food on the table or not, there's going to have to be a willingness to pretty much fight anyone at whatever notice and under whatever terms. In some ways it's great for the promoters, although they've had a rough time of it for the last few months, so it's hard not to feel sympathy for them anyway. But I think there will be a number of small hall fighters who, will be unsure about what the future holds. And I think it's the same with fighters in the amateur game who maybe haven't made squads for Olympic qualifying. Now, normally, a lot of them would have made a decision to turn pro. We saw Ellie Scotney, for example, was ready to turn pro in March before that show got cancelled or postponed, whatever we're saying now. And I think a lot of others as well. But then we did an interview recently with Sandy Ryan, who does still have a chance to make the Olympic team and is willing to wait that extra year for the postponed Olympics. And I'm sure a large part of what factors into those decisions from the amateurs is that the professional game's pretty much dead at the moment. And the opportunity, at least for the rest of this year, for a debutant to fight on a TV show, it's going to be very tough. Because with 5 slots per show and a lot of big names jostling for position, I wouldn't fancy your chances of squeezing onto one of them. So I can understand why a lot of those guys who would otherwise have turned pro with a lot of fanfare will be wanting to stay amateur for a bit longer and see where the cards fall and maybe wait until the start of next year. And it could be, small hall fighters, some of them getting squeezed out, and we hope that's not the case. But I'm struggling to think, apart from getting, a separate job, how they can support themselves in the meantime to carry on pursuing the boxing dream. It's hard enough anyway when you can fight 3 or 4 times a year. When that becomes once a year for those lucky enough to have already competed before the lockdown was put in place, or even worse, haven't fought at all this year, bills still have to be paid, food still needs to be put on the table. So my sympathy goes out to those guys, and as I said, my only advice is be ready and be willing and take chances, because no one's going to hold it against you if you suffer a defeat under those circumstances. You will get opportunities to come back, and hopefully by next year, boxing will be pretty much back to normal. Small hall shows will be more regular. But we shall see. No one really knows at the moment. But yeah, that's all I've got to say on the subject. I want to know what you think. Is your sympathy out there as mine is for the small hall fighters? Have you got any other advice for them, things they can do to help their own case? It'd be great to hear, because I'm obviously bereft of ideas. I'll be back on Monday for Reflections, 4:30 PM, and Thursday next week for the next FLEXpectations at the same time. Really appreciate it, as always, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.